Hi, David Taylor or Mr Pelargonium back with another one of my video blogs for the Pelargonium and Geranium Society. It's the start of autumn. Everything's having to come back into the greenhouse that's been outside. I'm also going to have a look today at Angel Pelargoniums in particular because getting them through the winter can be a little bit difficult. So let's get going. Well, hello again. It's good to be back. It's about a month really since I done a video. I've been really busy doing a number of other things, but Pelargoniums, I've had to keep them going. I've had to keep potting up my young cuttings that I've taken during the summer that we saw in previous videos. So there's been a lot going on. I've been having to sort of de-leaf plants that I spoke about last month, but the main thing that's happened is really in about the last week the weather has really turned. The weather in the UK has now got very, very wet. About the first 3 weeks of September, the weather was very sort of dry and the plants outside were growing away almost like it was summer because, of course, with a slightly weaker sun that we get at this time of year in September, when you get sort of milder days, it can be really good, and the plants like to grow really quite fast outside. But about a week ago, just over a week ago, I mean, I'm filming this on the 27th of September, Friday. About a week ago, the weather completely changed and it's been pouring with rain virtually every day since. So one of the first things that I've had to do is, in the last day or so, I've had to move some of my big pots from outside that I want to overwinter as large potted plants. Now these, I mean, here's an example. This is the sort of thing I mean. These are big pot plants that I bought in. I did do a bit of a video on showing how I clean some of these up, which I'll just sort of run over now. I mean, the main thing when you bring plants in from outside is ensuring that they're clean. And in the UK, particularly if we get a lot of wet weather, we get, you know, lots of slugs and snails on the plants. But the other main culprits that we get in the UK is caterpillars, the larvae, mostly of moths, that fly around. There's a vast array of different types of moth larvae that get on the plants. They lay their eggs, and the caterpillars, the larvae of the moths, just chew away at the leaves. And it's important to really go through when you're cleaning up your plants, get any dead or dying leaves off. But try and ensure that you're getting as many of these caterpillars off as possible. Just ensure, I mean, you usually go over them, you can usually see the little dots of their feces, and that sort of, you know, you can generally tell then that you have got them on the plant. So it's just a question of going through, lift up the leaves. The larvae, these caterpillars are usually on the underside of the leaves. And I've got an example, I think, coming up of one that I found. This was just obviously a young one, but some are pupated. I've thrown the pupa out of the moths in question. So that's the key thing. Get rid of any dead or dying leaves. Clean off as much as possible. Now, one of the problems that I've got, of course, is that these plants are now very wet, so I can't cut them back. They will get a cut back, but they are very wet at the moment, and I'm not going to be able to do that. I can do a bit of leaf stripping and clearing off the dead leaves, as you can see there, but it's very important to ensure that you've certainly got as many of the caterpillars off as possible, but also slugs and snails. Have a look round the pot, lift your pots up and turn them round, have a look underneath and ensure that you've got all your slugs and snails and things like that off of your plants. and then you can sort of safely, you know, put them under a bench, which is what I've done here, and just keep an eye on them initially. But the main problem that we've got, because I've done that just in the last day or two, is that they are very wet, and this is primarily why I've had to bring them in, because they're just getting too wet now and I need them to dry out a bit. The weather isn't cold by any manner of means, so you know, we're not we haven't got too many problems with frost. That's a bit further down the line. Although having said that, we did in early September get down to about 2 degrees, which just a couple of days where we did have a couple of very cold nights actually, but it's warmed up since then, so that was quite unusual. Right, now one of the types of pelargonium that I don't talk a great deal about are angels. It's mainly because I don't actually grow a great number of them. To grow them relatively well, you've got to have a bit of space because they can get quite big. But the other reason is I find them really quite difficult to get through the winter. They can be difficult because they have got, of course, very thin stems. Angel Pelargoniums, and one of the problems in the UK, of course, we get very damp, very sort of high humidity winters, not necessarily with the warmth, but certainly a very high humidity, very damp winters, and this can cause chaos on the little thin leaves of Angel Pelargoniums, and consequently you certainly need to go into the winter having cut them back relatively hard so that they're quite tight, strip some of the leaves off to sort of open it out, as I've been speaking about with all of the types of plants, but it's very important to do it with angels. And the thing with angels, because they're relatively short jointed, you can go quite deep into the stem and still get good breaks to make a really good shape. And there are some really top angel growers. Bob Clark is one that springs to mind. You've probably seen a good number of his plants in the videos I've done of the shows, where he produces really top quality grown plants, and he really knows how to really clip them down and really grow them bushy. And the other key thing with them as well, with Angel Pelargoniums, unlike many of the other types, is that you do not want to overfeed them. You really only need to feed them a sort of half-strength feed once a week during the main growing season. This is because if you give them a lot of feed, you'll get a lot of lanky growth grow off them, which you do not want. You want to keep them tight and bushy, so you do not want to be overfeeding them. Now here's an example of a plant. This is one of the late Terry Jarvis's plants, which I'm really trying to do my best to grow into something really quite special to put in the shows next year. Now this has grown on, I stopped it when I initially bought it to give it a good bit of shape, but it's really grown on strongly during the summer. And I'm now going to really reduce the feeding of this. I'll be watering it obviously during the winter, not very much. Angels like to be kept very dry during the winter, but in the meantime I'm going to give it a really good tight stop, which I'll show you how I'm sort of going to go about doing that in a sort of basic sort of way. But we see here we've got some really long stems. Hopefully you'll be able to see some of these. I mean, that's a really long stem that will be cut right down to a point where I've got 2 or 3 breaks just into that stem that's growing out. Because they're so short jointed, angels, you can usually get a good tight cut, but know that you're going to get a lot of bursting breaks through that will come and make a lovely bushy rounded plant, which is really what I'm after for a show plant. But you can do the same for any type of angel. They will respond, but the key thing to them is just don't overfeed them, because you'll get a lot of then lanky, weak, floppy growth, which, you know, can make them flop about, particularly if you want to put them outside during the summer. You know, that will make them sort of, when they get a bit of rain on them, it will make them completely collapse. So you really don't want to do that. Right, now with the rain absolutely bashing down onto the greenhouse, I'm just going to make a start there on this Angel. I might cut in now and again just to show you a few bits of the types of stem that I'm going to be cutting through. But all I'm going to do is cut it right back quite deep, and I'll show you sort of what's going to be left so that it can break through. But we can see here this stem in particular, it's got very long, hopefully you can pick that up, and I'm going to go right down in order to start shaping it. And there we are. I mean, that's sort of cut that through. That is a great long cut off. That's probably 2 to 3 inches long, but it's cut right down, and you can see, I'm hopeful that my camera is going to be able to focus on this, because just in there, obviously I can't really see this looking on the little screen of my camera, but we've cut back and there's just a nice little inner break above it and a nice little break below it just inside, and that's what I'm going to do all the way round, and they'll break. Those little breaks will make new stems to form a nice sort of, you know, a ball-shaped plant, which is ultimately what you're wanting. But you're going to get a lot of material like this cut off. I mean, this could be used perfectly for cuttings, but I've just not got the room for any more cuttings. Plus the fact now, at the tail end of September, I would probably need to give this a little bit of heat in order to allow the cutting to root, but I'm not going to do that. I haven't got the room for any more cuttings, so these are just going to unfortunately have to be disposed of. Now this is a plant called Margaret Harris. It's got quite a large lilac and creamish bloom, and it does make a very, very good canopy. So we'll have to see how it goes on this one. Right, okay, so I've finished cutting back this Angel now, and there we are. There's not a great deal left of it, bar stumps. I've gone back really quite hard. I mean, Angels, though, just like Regals, put on quite a bit of growth during the cooler period of the autumn and winter, but you just have to keep a bit more of an eye on them to ensure that you're not getting any botrytis onto those little tight stems, because once you do and the botrytis gets hold of that little stem, the stem will be gone and you'll have to cut it out. So you need to keep an eye on them, but I've really cut this back hard now. You really do need to sort of ensure that this is sort of kept really quite dry. You need to keep it dry during the winter. I mean, that's been cut back hard, so its demand for water, etc., will be much less. It's just slightly damp. I mean, you can with Angels though get away with doing a pretty hard cutback with a slightly damp compost, because they seal over really quickly. But that's done there. And that'll hopefully burst through, ready for stopping in about the sort of January, February time when I do the Angels. Right, now as I've said, I mean, there's not much flower. I've got 1 or 2 blooms on some of my plants. These will be stripped off soon. 1 or 2 yellowing leaves just starting to come on 1 or 2 plants. Ensure that you just take those off. They're not hard to spot. It's an easy spot. But I will take the blooms off. I want them to, you know, use their energy and just keeping themselves going now. As we get into October, the days are getting much shorter now. We're obviously past the equinox, the autumn equinox, so the nights are already longer than the days. And it's important to ensure that any dead or dying leaves you just strip off. And then, you know, just keep everything nice and orderly. Now I've actually been through and tidied everything up because I'm going on holiday next month in October, and my daughter is going to be here and in charge of watering and looking after stuff. She's really actually quite good. She takes after me quite well. So yeah, she'll be going through. I've made everything nice and easy for her to be going through with the watering can as needed. Now, something else that I've done, I gave our standards, these Robin Louise standards that I've been cultivating over the last year or so, I gave these a bit of a stop, because this one in particular was just beginning to bend over a bit, so I've tied it in and I've given it a really hard stop. They're really quite dry, and so they've been cut back to really push them back to enable lots of side shoots to grow out to begin to round the plant. I mean, I'm still hopeful of being able to maybe get that in the show, either one of these or both of them in the show next year. So, but we'll have to see how they develop, I think. Right, now another thing that I've got to do is issue out an apology. Now I know that there's a lot of our top growers that watch this channel, and I'm going to put out an apology to Peter Waving. Now he developed, remember I spoke last month about a plant called Annie Grace. This is it. It's actually been cut back really quite hard, I think, since you last saw this. I cut it back and it is really beginning to sprout through. You can see how plants begin to sprout through once you've given them a really good hard cutback. But this was actually a plant developed by Peter Waving. He bred this. I thought I was told that it was one of Ken Diamond's plants, but it actually wasn't. It was bred by Peter Waving and named after another top grower, Keith Bush. He's a good regal grower, so you may have seen some of his plants in the PAGS show reviews and things like that. But Peter Waving bred this plant, and it is named after Keith Bush's granddaughter. Annie Grace is her first name. I think Annie Grace Holloway or something along those lines. As I say, it's important once the damper weather sets in, and here's an example perhaps why you want to take your blooms off now, is once you get that damp in there and that falls down onto the leaves, they'll start to rot. And you can start to have all kinds of issues. So it's important to continually inspect your greenhouse plants. I've got a couple of yellow leaves on that one as well. It's all because the light is really beginning to fade. So you just need to start adopting winter procedures now, keeping an eye on your plants, inspecting them, continue to sort of break off some of the leaves, and just sort of open the plants out, ready for those damp conditions of the winter. Yeah, so there we are. If you're visiting this channel for the first time and like what you're seeing, click the subscribe button below. I look forward to seeing you again at the end of October, when we really will be getting into the depths of autumn with winter on the horizon. So I look forward to seeing you then, and in the meantime, thanks for viewing and goodbye for now.